Welcome to the Queen's Conversations podcast, the official podcast for United Queendom LLC, hosted by Teddi Rene. Hey there. Welcome back, guys, to another episode of the Queen Conversations podcast. This is your host, Teddi Rene, and as always, I just want to take a moment to just say thank you to everyone who is joining us again for another episode, and welcome to everyone joining us for the very first time. This is our second solo episode of season 2, and the season theme, or the theme for this season, is when I got out of my own way. So there are going to be a lot of stories, our guests speaking to that, and a time in their lives where they were the only thing holding themselves back from success and the greatness that they could absolutely achieve. And in the solo episodes, I will essentially be giving you some information in a variety of areas that I myself have gotten out of my own way, had to get out of my own way in order to move to the next level of my life. So today's episode is absolutely aligned to that mission and that goal as we discuss the topic of boundaries. So boundaries is absolutely one of my favorite words as of 2019. It is something that I never knew that I needed. I didn't quite understand what it was or how it affected me, but it absolutely changed my life. It was the theme for the first half of the year, not just the first month or the first quarter, but literally it has allowed me to move through some of the most emotionally challenging months of the last 5 years, outside of like those immediately following like my mother's death. This year has been amazing in the growth that I have achieved and, where I've been versus where I am. And I am just so proud of myself, and I'm so proud of my friends, and I'm so proud of my family, because we all are growing and evolving into the people that we are supposed to be. And for a lot of us, it has a lot to do with our incorporating and implementing safe and just healthy boundaries. So a few things about boundaries. So just kind of set the precedent. So at the beginning of this year, I was going through pretty much like a lot in almost all of the major relationships in my life, friendships, romantic involvements. Like, it was just stuff on top of stuff. The kids were acting out. It was just a mess. Everyone that was important to me was acting a fool, right? It was everybody but me, right? No, it wasn't. But around that time, like literally January, as I'm going through these things, like literally, like there was this one big blow up with my best friend. And I want to say it happened like January 13th or something, right? And then I'm listening to my podcast, and in true and perfect form, in the form of God, like literally perfectly aligned with what I needed to hear and the direction I needed to go to reclaim my life and take control over it, was an episode of the Woman Evolve podcast with Sarah Jakes Roberts called Build a Gate. And it spoke to boundaries, right? It spoke to, allowing other people access to you, or like access into your gate in regards to how they act and the things that they do, and how their actions and their personality and their, energy aligns with your boundaries. And it was, like I said, it was like perfect alignment, because this is what I needed. Shortly after that, I did start reading book Boundaries by Dr. Henry Cloud, and it just clarified and just brought to life like a whole nother level about what boundaries were, why I needed them, how to implement them, how to set them, how to implement them, how to maintain them. And then also the importance of, respecting other people's boundaries and seeing other people's boundaries for what they were. And then it just went through like boundaries at work, boundaries in relationships, boundaries in your children, and it just went into all of this stuff about how boundaries affect and touch every part of your life or our lives. And oddly enough, the friend that I had like this major falling out with, like the biggest fallout, once they also recognized that they had an issue with setting and respecting their own boundaries, and then also the boundaries of others. Once they started doing their own work and I started doing my own work, and both of our work involved setting healthy boundaries and then communicating that, our relationship has been 1,000 times better. Okay. And this is something that I've been intentionally implementing in every aspect of my life. So at work, I have very strict boundaries about, how long I'm going to work after I leave the office. I leave at a certain time. I commute home. There are a couple hours or hour or so left in the workday. And then once I reach the end of that, I'm done. Right? There are very limited times where I will access or answer a work email or work phone outside of that time period, because I simply do not want anyone thinking that they have 100% full access to me all the time, especially when I have so many other things that I am also responsible to and responsible for, like my children. So here are just a few things about boundaries that I've gathered from the Woman Evolve episode, Build a Gate, the book Boundaries by Dr. Henry Cloud. And then also there was an episode of Therapy for Black Girls, which was episode 86. So those were the 3 things that came into my life and were presented to me directly, specifically in regards to boundaries, that allowed me to navigate the space, navigate the topic, and then implement it in my life in a way that allowed for dramatic and amazing change. So here are some of the things that I myself often remind myself of. These are just different things that I have to remember when old ways try to sneak in. These are just some of the things that I keep in mind when I'm exercising that muscle. All right. So number 1 is that boundaries define who I am, and not only for myself, but for other people. So when we have a clear set of boundaries, people who cannot adhere to and respect those boundaries won't even try to access you. They won't even try you. They will stop in their tracks when they realize that you are about your business and that you are serious about your boundaries and the consequences for not respecting them. Have you ever wondered why at some point in your life you seem to attract the same type of specific type of person, or why the same lessons or the same types of chaos seem to find you? People always say you attract the energy that you give, and that speaks very clearly to boundaries. So if you are lacking in boundaries, if you have very weak boundaries, then there are certain people who dwell and who actually thrive off of that type of environment and that energy, and they will absolutely slip in if they are allowed to. So if you have ever found yourself repeating lessons, or finding yourself in the same types of situations, or dating the same type of people, or befriending the same types of friends, and not in the best ways, if you really do a very serious check with your boundaries, I'm pretty sure you'll find some areas where you can kind of tighten up and prevent that chaos from attempting to gain access, and tighten up so much that even if they do attempt, because maybe they're used to a former version of yourself, or maybe they think that, they'll be the exception, having those tight boundaries is the best defense against that unwanted energy and those unwanted and negative people. One area that comes to mind on this topic of boundaries is dating. So a lot of people will say that, they attract the same type of guy or the same type of woman, but what is it that you are allowing that speaks to that type of woman or speaks to that type of man and lets them know that those things that are not acceptable, by you saying this is unacceptable, what are your actions saying, or your lack of action saying that is telling them the opposite? So, that's a space where you may want to check your boundaries and put some very clear limits and restriction to certain types of people or certain actions of people. If you see someone doing X, then that's a red flag. Red flag means I'm putting some distance between us of some sort, things like that. So that's number 1. Boundaries define who I am, not only for myself, but for others. Number 2, and it may seem common sense, but it obviously is not, because it was in the book, it was on the podcast, and it's something that I used to struggle with all the time, and I'll tell you why. But number 2 is that you have to respect your own boundaries. So we all expect other people to respect our wishes and our desires and the things that we want. But a lot of times it's us who need to respect them, you know? So, I have a shirt that I make through Paraphernalia University. It says respect my budget. And there's another one that says respect my diet. And literally I made those shirts because I was speaking to myself, right? So like I'll set boundaries on what I should be putting into my body, or what I should be spending and when I should be spending it and how I should be spending it. And then I don't respect those boundaries myself. However, you know, if my friends say, hey, let's go out eat, or hey, let's go do this thing that costs money, I expect them to respect when I say, guys, I don't have any money, or guys, you know, I'm trying to this new balanced diet, or I'm changing my diet to be more healthier. Like, please respect it. But if we're not respecting our own boundaries, why should anyone else respect them? How can we expect anyone else to respect them? So, you know, boundaries involve taking responsibility for your own actions and the consequences of them. So a lot of people will blame circumstance, or they'll blame other people for having weak boundaries themselves, and then having to deal with the consequences that come from not adhering to and respecting their own boundaries. And it won't be easy setting healthy boundaries, especially if you aren't used to it. But again, it is a muscle, and we can exercise it daily by deciding every single day what we will and will not allow, and what we will and will not participate in ourselves. You know, taking other people out of it. What is it that I am going to do? What is it that I am not going to do? I mean, the bottom line is you can't expect other people to respect boundaries if you aren't enforcing them with yourself. You set the rules, so you also have to live by them, or no one will take you serious. I mean, and that's just that on that. Number 3, and this one is, it's funny because I am, in a former life, I was a spoiled brat. If you ask my best friend, I'm still a little spoiled brat, but a much more respectful brat. Number 3 is that you have to respect other people's boundaries. And this was a very big one for me throughout my work with boundaries, because I used to take other people needing space, and other people having other things to do, and other people, you know, like when I wanted attention or I wanted things, other people doing something other than what I wanted them to do, I took it personally. You know, I took it as a mark against me, or a mark against our friendship, or just, you know, there were some feelings of inadequacy or not being enough, things that stemmed from like my childhood and my upbringing and all those things. But it wasn't until I started digging into boundary work that I recognized that, you know, what is it about this person's boundaries that trigger me, or what exactly about them taking time and space for themselves, or them needing what they need? Why does that bother me? Other people deserve the right to set their own boundaries. And I absolutely had a hard time accepting that and respecting their boundaries. So it made me want to look inside, because it was like, well, now that we're going through these boundaries and this information on boundaries, I recognize that whatever feelings I felt were my responsibility. They were no one else's responsibility. No one else could make me feel that way. It was all me. So then I had to say, okay, when this person does this, I feel this way. Why do I feel that way? What is the trigger? What is the part that leads up to that feeling? And from there, I could work backwards and start practicing accepting other people's boundaries. And again, it's a work in progress. Sometimes I'm better at it than other times. But one thing that does help me in respecting other people's boundaries is checking myself and making sure that I am working within my own boundaries, so that I'm not overstepping or trying to overstep into someone else's space. And, you know, just because I didn't manage my own. So that goes back to number 2. You have to respect your own boundaries. It's like people who spend all their money, even though they know they shouldn't, and then go asking their family members or their friends for the money, and then get mad when their friends say no. Like, no, that's your problem. Like, that's you, not your friend's fault that you don't have the money that you need or want, you know? And it's like, if that is a consequence of you not respecting your own financial boundaries, then why are you even mad that this other person is not giving you what is not yours? Like, that is one of those things where it's like, why am I getting upset that I can't have what someone else has? Looking into yourself can absolutely help you with respecting other people's boundaries. And then this kind of leads into number 4, which is that knowing the difference between what and who you are responsible for versus what and who you are responsible to have made all the difference. And it has made the difference between being peaceful and being in a space of just inner turmoil. Like, it's been the difference between overextending and overstepping, and then just peace and serenity and just security. It's hard, especially when we have people that we care about and we really want to help those people, but there are a great deal of tasks and experiences and lessons and consequences in the lives of the people that we love that we just cannot live and experience for them. We are not responsible for other people's happiness or their finances or their insecurities or their feelings of inadequacy or their anxiety, but we can be responsible to our friend. We can be responsible to our family members. We can be responsible to our mates or our children or to whatever it is that relates us to the other person. We can be responsible to that relationship to someone to an extent that allows us to be aware of their triggers. So not to trigger them, right? That allows us to be sensitive to their circumstances so that we can play a supportive role as they, navigate and deal with whatever obstacles or anxiety or feelings that they're having. Because again, we can't live those or fix those. We just there is absolutely no way that you can fix a broken person. You cannot heal someone. You can help them navigate their path to healing. You can help them navigate their path to wholeness. You can be a support system as they go through and deal with it, the process, but they have to go through the process. We cannot go through the process for them, but we can walk with them every now and then. And we may not be able to walk with them the whole way, but we can absolutely walk with them some of the way, right? So, you can't fix them or learn the lessons for them. And at the end of the day, if you try, you will only stress yourself out and ruin your own inner peace, right? Whatever peace or whatever tranquility and security you have within yourself, one of the easiest ways to just negate all of that is by trying to help or force someone else into that same space instead of allowing them to go through the process. Trust the process, respect their progress, or respect your progress. Don't, regress trying to be Superman or whatever it is that you may be trying to do. And that leads us into number 5. And number 5 is my absolute most favorite thing about boundaries. And that is that boundaries can be learned. Right? So after doing all of this intense work with boundaries, with my therapist and my support system and just by myself through reading and research and studying, to help me identify why I felt the way I did when the people that I cared for set boundaries, or why I was attracting the same type of energy or the same type of guys or the same type of friends in my life. I began to think about how much easier some of the things that I was learning and just how much easier some things in life would have been had I learned about boundaries earlier, right? Had this been something like a tool in my tool belt from childhood or adolescence or any time in my life prior to when I actually did it, how much better, how much more peaceful would my life be? And what could I have done with that information? What would I have done with that information? I don't know. But for this reason, I have intentionally been teaching my children how to set safe and appropriate boundaries for themselves to, feel comfortable with expressing themselves when they are uncomfortable, and then to just have that autonomy to decide, what they will and will not participate in. I don't make them hug people when they don't want to. I don't even make them speak to people when they don't want to, but I do let them know, you're being, that could be considered being rude, and you don't know what this person that we are interacting with right now. You don't know what type of person that they could be in the best ways, or what type of information you can get from them, or they might have some money or a gift or candy or something, and you don't know what you are limiting how you're limiting yourself by just not speaking and just saying hi and being pleasant is something very small. That doesn't require a lot. However, if you don't want to do it, I get it. I understand. But don't be surprised if the consequences, outweigh what it would have cost you to just say hello. Don't be upset. So, I don't make them do things like that. They say, people say, oh, come give me a hug. And, my kids say no. And it's like, oh, well, she doesn't want to be hugged. And then that's that. I also allow them to have time and space to themselves. So a lot of times my daughter will just kind of get on my son's nerves to the point where he's just like, I just want to get away from her. And so we have a closed door rule in my house where I will allow them to close their bedroom doors and go inside of their room and be in pure solitude and bliss or whatever it is they want to do in there for up to an hour at a time. And it's not like they can go in there for an hour, open the door for a minute, and then go back in for another hour. Like there are like spaces of time that are like minimums required for after. So if you do an hour with your door closed, then you have to do 2 consecutive hours with your door open before you can do another hour closed. I mean, and this is just because I don't want them getting into the habit of just closing themselves out from the world, especially if they're not in the best of moods. But I do want them to know that it is okay to take some time for yourself. But at some point you have to resurface and face the thing that is bothering you or challenging you. And I think this is just good practice, but at the same time, giving them the opportunity to close their door. A lot of times parents don't let their children close the door. It's, don't you close no doors, no closed doors in my house. But it's like, why? Like it's a bedroom with a door on hinges for a reason. Why can't the child close the door? Do you not trust them? And that's something that setting clear boundaries can help you with if you don't trust your children. And that's something that we definitely do in our house. I also set very clear boundaries as to what will and will not be accepted in our household. And then I make the consequences of crossing those boundaries very, very clear long before they commit the act, right? So long before they're put in a situation where they have to decide whether to adhere to the boundary or cross the boundary, they have the information that they need to make the best decision. Now, if they choose the not so good decision, they also already know what the consequences are. And this helps me to, maintain some type of order to be able to build trust with my children. The more that they can prove to me that they can be responsible to the boundaries set in this house, then the more freedom they'll get. And then it's like, if they prove that they cannot be responsible with a certain level of freedom that I offer them, like my son had a cell phone before, didn't quite go so well, so it was taken. But he knew that well in advance that, this is what I expect of you in regards to this cell phone. This is what it is for. This is what it is not for. This is when you use it. This is when you don't use it. Violation of those boundaries, any of those boundaries will result in me taking this phone from you. And when I mean take it, I mean taking it, cutting the line off, and that's that. Maybe later, as you gain more of my trust, we can revisit this and you may be able to get a phone back, you may not. And, well, now he has his phone back, but it took some time, and, they know well in advance at what point their freedom can change and to what level, and to a level that which they've already proven that they can be responsible with. So, maybe he can't have Wi-Fi access after 6 p.m. but he may still be able to have the phone up until 5, and then we just block the Wi-Fi or block the router after that. Like if that's something that he's proven that he can be responsible to, a certain level of access, a certain level of freedom. So boundaries absolutely can be learned. And I encourage everyone to teach, all the parents to teach their children, because you never know what type of situations they may find themselves in life. And if they haven't had clear training, I would say, in how to set boundaries, how to express those boundaries, and how to implement the consequences of violating those boundaries, then, they may end up finding themselves in some very dangerous situations or some very life-changing situations. As parents, we want to give our children the best chances to be the best types of people and live the best types of lives. And I believe that giving them boundaries at a very early age, as early as they can understand it, is vital to that. And I mean, as long as the boundaries are age appropriate, I think that children from birth can learn boundaries, right? Babies learn early that you can only go to the edge of the bed. You go over the edge of the bed, you going over the edge of the bed. Okay, that's a boundary. I absolutely believe in natural consequences for children, or actually just natural consequences, period. And, that also helps to set some very natural boundaries. But we can mimic that in our parenting styles, and we can mimic that in our friendships. We can mimic that in our relationships. And, they say you teach people how to treat you. That is absolutely true. You teach them by setting boundaries and expectations, and then letting them be free to make the decisions that they make. The same is true for people. I now set very clear boundaries, and I let other people know my intentions up front early on, right? And, I also let them know like where I stand on certain topics and how their access to me will change if certain lines are crossed. The most important thing that I've done so far when it comes to boundaries is follow through with what those consequences are. It took me a while and it is something that I am still practicing, but there's just so much more peace in my life. I don't dwell on lost or failed relationships as much as I used to. I have clarity again around like what happened in specific situations, to a point where I no longer blame myself for things that weren't my fault, or, I don't think less of myself or less of the other person. And I can honestly say that, I did all of that. Like, I've done all that I could do in certain situations. So I don't feel like less than, right? Like, back when I was doing my boundaries work in like January, February, March, like I got ghosted. Like ghosted. Like we were like, it's somebody that I knew from like school, and we started dating and we got really close really fast. Set some boundaries, didn't really follow through with them. See, there's that. And then he just disappeared, like gone. And when I say gone, I don't mean like left the country or like he lives like right across the street from me. Like he's around, he's just gone. And, for a couple of weeks, actually, I was just like, what the hell happened? Like, what did I do? Like, what? But then, going back to the boundaries work, going back to what I was working on with myself, I started to, go through the information and say, you know what? That has nothing to do with me. Like, that is like nothing that I did. Like, that wasn't me. Okay. Wasn't me. And that's something that, I know Therapy for Black Girls just did an episode on ghosting. And that is something that a lot more people are doing these days. And I think that it is very traumatic for people, especially people who are used to knowing things, people who are used to communication, people who need to have dialogue or who prefer dialogue, people who are used to healthy communication. It's traumatic when you don't get that. And that is a part of boundary work, like knowing what you are responsible for and what you are responsible to. That man, first of all, that man was a Gemini. Enough said. Like they always have some inner turmoil. As he says, he had some demons inside of him that he'd been battling. And you know what I have to say to him? And I've said it to his face. Thank you. Thank you for removing me from your space while you're battling those demons, because the boundaries that I have set, they don't have any space for that. I appreciate you for recognizing that. And we move on. So boundary work, knowing what you're responsible for versus what you're responsible to, absolutely helps in situations like that. Here's a recap. All right. So number 1, boundaries define who you are and who you are not. Number 2, you have to respect your own boundaries. Number 3, you have to respect the boundaries of others. Number 4, the difference between peace and turmoil is knowing what you're responsible for and who or what you are responsible to. And number 5, boundaries can be learned. All right, guys. So that is all I have for you guys today. I hope you enjoyed this. Let me know if you've read Boundaries by Dr. Henry Cloud. If you've listened to Therapy for Black Girls, let me know what you thought about it. The specialist or the expert on there was amazing. There are also a couple, and as a matter of fact, I think that's where I got the suggestion for Dr. Henry Cloud's book, Boundaries. And he also has a great book called Integrity. Pick that one up too. Okay. Your girl, Sarah Jakes Roberts, put me onto to that one not too long ago on her podcast. And then again, if you've listened to Sarah Jakes Roberts' episode of Woman Evolve entitled Build a Gate, let me know how you felt about that. Let me know how you feel about boundaries. Do you know how to set healthy boundaries? Have you started? How's that working for you? What are you struggling with? Do you need a boundary accountability partner? Shoot, when I started, Laura Cruz, that is my girl. All right. When I was dating, she was my boundaries accountability partner. Girl, you're going on this date, but what you're not going to do is go over his house afterwards. All right. I'm going to call you and make sure that after dinner, you got yourself in the car and you're on your way home. She helped me maintain my boundaries because, sometimes you just don't want to. So, let me know. All right. As always, you can catch solo episodes here on Tuesday with me, like today. And on Thursdays, you can catch our guest episodes. And this Thursday, episode 4 of season 2, we have Carter Shaw Day. And the episode is entitled New City, New Friends. So make sure that you download, subscribe, like, share, all of that, and come back on Thursday and get all of the gems and the good information, the good vibes, and just the networking opportunities and just amazingness that is Carter Shaw Day. All right, guys, that is going to do it for me. As always, you can find me on Instagram at Teddi Rene. You can find me on Twitter at Teddi_Rene, and the KC Podcast on Twitter and Instagram. You can always find United Queendom at United Queendom on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, or visit us at unitedqueendom.com. All right, y'all. Bye-bye. Thank you.